When we look back on 2021, it will largely be remembered as the year the world tentatively crept out of lockdown. Between the almost miraculous COVID vaccine rollout and shifts in public health policy, by summer, many people felt safe to leave their houses for the first time in over a year. But if you look at the incredible TV that was being brought to us in 2021 via countless streamers, cable channels, and sure, hey, maybe even broadcast networks, you could understand why some people would rather just sit on the couch anyway. So as we bid another very weird year goodbye, the Great Pop Culture Debate wants to look back and give thanks for this new golden age of television as we share our thoughts on the best television of 2021. If you're listening to this, that means I'm still under Wanda Maximoff's spell and I'm playing the role of your wacky gay neighbor. I'm your host, Eric Rezsnyak. Please help me welcome our amazing panel. She gives herself one treat a year, and last year it was strippers on ice. It's Amma Marfo.
I was born to do this. I was raised to do this. So let's go.
And I want to thank you, Amma, for that tip, even after I fell on that double Lutz. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Next, he possesses the world's largest collection of Deborah Vance branded caftans. He is easy, breezy, and beautiful. Welcome, Jonny Minogue.
It's the best way to look smart. Jean smart, that is.
And this is Johnny's first ever episode with the podcast, so please be gentle with him. Welcome back. Welcome back, Kate Racculia, the Great Pop Culture Debate's very own bassoonist fatal.
I actually don't own a label maker, but I still could kill you with poison.
You listen, that's fine, Kate, but please do not mix your instrument cleaning kit with my sex toys, and I say that more for your benefit than mine. And finally, we are so excited to welcome our special guest star, our Heather Locklear of this episode, if you will. She went all the way to the moon to find good television. It's Kathryn VanArendonk from Appointment Television Podcast and Vulture. Welcome, Kathryn.
Hi, thank you so much. I promise not to bring any particular, late night 90s drama, except for when, of course, that does have to happen. Thank you very much.
I will be listening to the wailing guitars as you're throwing all the papers off a desk. So
that's correct. Yes.
That's all I ask. So our best of episodes are a little different than our usual format. There are no polls, no brackets, barely even any debating. Our panelists are just going to do a pop culture show and tell on our individual top 3 TV series for the year. Do you disagree with some of our picks? Do you want to add your own favorites to the discussion? Head to greatpopculturedebate.com and leave a comment on this episode, or find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook and tell us what you think. With that out of the way, let's get to these top 3s. I'm going to start in alphabetical order, and that means, Amma, you are up first.
Okay, so we're going in alphabetical order, and I'm actually going to go in chronological order, because if I had to do a favorite, we'd be here till the end of next year. So I'm starting with January and with WandaVision. And it is wild to me that the TV part of the MCU, this latest version, started this year. But it did, and it started with WandaVision.
What?
Exactly. I'm like, how the hell was that this year? But yeah, end of January, or like middle of January, was when we got WandaVision, which I was so excited about, because that is a show that loves TV as much as I love TV.
Yeah.
And just the commitment that they took to getting each like progression of TV right, and all the small references that it takes to get those sorts of things right, was really interesting to me, just as someone who loves the form and was like, do they care enough about this to get it right? And they did. But I also really like it because there's so many pieces of the MCU that depend upon one another to be able to be enjoyed. And I'm somebody who likes Marvel movies. I don't necessarily rush out to go see the new one the very instant it comes out. So I'm casual enough of a fan that I know that things connect, and most of the time I understand those connections. And I really liked that at a moment where sometimes we didn't have the mental bandwidth to kind of chase down pieces, there was a self-contained bit of entertainment that you could enjoy for the most part, whether you had a sense of what was going on with other pieces of the MCU or not. And that has changed as an approach as those television shows have gone forward. Captain America Winter Soldier connects to other things. Loki connects to other things. Hawkeye's going to connect to other things. And it's a little bit harder to do that now. So for me, as someone who finds himself to be a little bit more casual in that world, it was approachable. And I really, really liked that about it. And then the last piece I'll say is the idea of being trapped by grief at the beginning of like the second year of being not trapped per se, but like still not knowing how much longer we had before we were going to be vaccinated and a path out of what we were dealing with. that was really attractive. And I know that some of the lines that dealt with it more explicitly got made fun of a great deal on social media, but there is something about that idea of like, most of us hadn't found a mechanism to grieve for a lot of stuff that we'd lost. So the idea of it felt additionally poignant. So I really, really liked that about it.
That's an interesting point, especially someone who's more of a casual MCU, because I'm diehard and I watch all of them. So for me, like I'll be very honest, like the finale kind of bummed me out because I was expecting things to happen, which didn't happen. And that is 100% on me. And it was a good reminder to not like expect certain things out of a show, just enjoy it. So there's that lesson again. But did anybody else watch the show who also maybe is not a super MCU fan, but still enjoyed it?
Oh yeah, that would absolutely be my experience of WandaVision. I walk into every Marvel property like Troy from Community, just holding a pizza. I walk in and I say, "What's going on here?" And I am almost immediately pummeled every time by all of the things that I do not recognize. Now, this would seem to be a contradiction because what I'm telling you is that I watch a lot of it, but that also I understand none of it. And you would think that I would be capable of retaining from one property to the next really truly anything about how any of these characters connect in any way. But sadly, that is not the case. And so I come to each new one like a fresh baby. And the WandaVision, I completely agree that it is... Part of what made it feel so accessible was that because it was this self-contained story, which they were able to kind of create a fictional excuse for, it felt like it was balancing its stakes in a way that I could understand. I mean, in the case of something like Loki, where you have an ending where a character shows up and I'm supposed to be like, oh shit, and like I don't. That's a situation where they've failed to create stakes that for people who don't know what's happening. And when you start from this assumption that everything is, you know what it is, you are being more careful about how characters are developed in that arc, which is, I think, totally correct about like why WandaVision worked. I also found the ending disappointing, but not in a way that like bounced back and retroactively undid my appreciation of the show.
Oh, 100. I still think it's a terrific series, and I loved those first couple episodes. Like you could
before
see
you
things
knew
were not quite right.
Yep.
Yeah, but you didn't quite know what was going on. To me, like I was just loving that.
It was also like a real-time show that people all watched together over a period of weeks. Like,
yes.
When was the last time Game of Thrones that happened? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. It was, as Kathryn might say, appointment television.
Hey, look at that.
And also, like, anything that makes the internet lose its mind about Kathryn Hahn, just like, yes.
Yes. So let me also say that, like, it was one of those things where people were like, did you know how good she was? And I was like, yeah, many of us have known for several years. And I would say the same thing about Paul Bettany. I have literally been yelling about how good Paul Bettany has been for 20 years. So when people were finally, yes, since A Knight's Tale. So A Knight's Tale Paul Bettany walked so that like magic show Paul Bettany vision could run. And
let's be clear. A Knight's Tale Paul Bettany walked naked.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. But yeah, so it was so nice to see.
Yeah, Google it.
Yeah, get on in there. It's excellent. But yeah, it's one of those things where it was also really rewarding in that regard that it let the people in it shine really brightly.
Yeah, yep.
Like Paul Bettany had not had that kind of showcase in the MCU before that just because his character didn't allow for it. So I did really like it. And the fact that Kathryn Hahn is getting more of what she got to do is rightfully deserved and the perfect outcome for this.
One thing I can say is I actually did not watch it at all. However, I can come from this fact that I knew exactly who Agatha was. I knew Agnes. I knew Agatha all along. And there's this great meme of her winking over Michael Sembello's Maniac to a bunch of random pictures of just things getting all fucked up. And I did not need to watch the show to know that's my bitch. So I can understand why if someone who's really into the MCU, I am absolutely 100% not. No tea, no shade. It's just not my cup of lemonade. But I can understand why just from Kathryn Hahn's character and the way she portrayed Agatha. So this is all amazing.
It is amazing. And thank you. That's a great pick. Speaking of comic books, I'm going to get to my next pick. And I'm already feeling Kate sharpen the knives. So I'm really excited.
That's the sound of my knives
you.
sharpening. No, I'm not going to come for you. I will just have a little rejoinder. Go ahead.
That is so good. Although I'm going to start by saying why I think it's not great. But it's The Nevers season 1 on HBO.
Can I join Kate? Sorry.
Yes,
You can. You can. I'm so excited. But let me start with this disclaimer, which is that this is a Joss Whedon show. And Joss Whedon in 2021, not a great place to be. He's been justifiably called out for his years of shockingly bad treatment against women and people of color. And he's getting his comeuppance, right? That is happening. Unfortunately, his DNA is all over this show. Like it is quintessentially a Whedonverse program, right? With that being said, he's been pushed out of it at this point. And when the show returns, assuming it does return, I know they filmed additional episodes after he's been removed from the helm. It will be different showrunners, although they're people who I believe have worked with him for many years. I'm going to play the old separating the art from the artist card, and you can say to me, bullshit, and I will take that, but I'm going to play it. So what is The Nevers, if you've never heard of it? So the quickest summation I can give to you, and the reason why I love it deeply, is as an old school comic geek, this is the 1980s Chris Claremont X-Men, but retold as a Victorian steampunk tale where all the powers are not mutations, but instead the result of an alien visitation. And all of the leads are unilaterally women or people of color or some other kind of other in society. And I literally don't believe there's a single straight white male character who's portrayed as anything other than a monster or an abuser, which is ironic given what we know about Joss Whedon. But here we are. So as I mentioned, it is a hard sell because it's a Whedon, but there are so many things that I do love about this show. I think that the two lead characters in it, they're strong, but through the male gaze version of strong. Like when you go back and look at Buffy now, you realize, yes, that's a quote strong female character, but it's still a man writing that character, right? Mm-hmm. But I love their dynamic together. And I think there's this really rich supporting cast that needs to be utilized more than it is. The moments that I think that show really shines are when the supporting cast is kind of getting raised up to a level where they're part of the action. The powers are super interesting, and it's just loaded with subplots. So for me, it's hitting all of these notes of all the different things that I did love about the Whedonverse, not recognizing the kind of darkness that was going on behind the scenes. And then the final episode of part 1, I guess, of season 1, it's not the full first season. It takes a page right out of Dollhouse, which I also loved, by taking a leap to a completely different time, a completely different location, with a completely different cast of characters that you know nothing about, but yet completely revealed so much about what was going on. A lot of people hated it. A lot of people hated that. I ate it up, and I was furious when I realized that I was going to have to wait months for more of it. But the thing that really does resonate so much with the show, as I mentioned, is that it is that top tier 1980s X-Men 100%. It's not just like the rough drawings of the X-Men. It's a full copy and paste. He's just changed all the characters and concepts enough that he's not going to get sued. Like Olivia Williams is full on doing a Professor X deal.
Yes, she is. You're right.
Dennis O'Hare is 100% a like Victorian era Mr. Sinister. Malady is a takeoff of Typhoid Mary. Like it's all right there. It's just switched so much, and I'm never going to get that TV show, right? I'm never going to be able to see those characters that I loved reading growing up in a TV show, but I'm getting it here, and that's because Whedon loved that run. He loved it so much, he actually wrote the X-Men comics for a brief period of time. This is him being able to actually like get in there and play with those characters, and I love seeing it. I really do. So go ahead, come at me. I'm ready.
Okay. So like all of my arguments are going to be like, I loved the show for personal reasons. So who am I to come for you for that? But like basically, and look, anything with Hot Vicar is like a bisexual, like libertine, I am into. Hot Vicar. James Norton, Grantchester, Hot Vicar. But like I was watching it and I was like, grading on a curve. I'm kind of in. And then something happens like 3 or 4 episodes in where it's this like beautiful, hopeful thing. And then someone is killed so dramatically. Yes. And I was like, oh, fuck you, Joss Whedon. And I just turned it off. So there's other TV I want to watch, but I understand why you dig it.
That's fair. And I can understand why that moment in particular broke you from the show because it is brutal. But again, to me, it's so quintessentially Joss Whedon.
Yeah, well, that was it, right? It's like brutal and unearned. And I was like, no.
I won't even deny that. I won't. But to me, I was just like, okay, I need to see where they go next with this. And I guess you could frankly argue that was a MacGuffin, and it would have made it far too easy had that character continued. Yeah. But anyway, Kathryn, you had thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are really petty.
Kathryn, I live for pettiness. It's my signature color.
We do that here.
Yeah. Well, so my less petty thought is sort of fundamentally at odds with the show that Whedon wants to make, but is a bigger frustration that I have with TV, which is that, a thing happens in the last episode of this half of television, a big dramatic thing. And my feeling is, if that's the TV show you want to make, you should make that TV show from the start. And that should be the TV show that you're making, instead of,
Sneaky.
this thing where you sort of create this world, build it, and then be like, "Ha, suckers! It's a different show." And I think it's, I have a lot of quibbles with. I really fell deeply in love with like what a Joss Whedon show is, and then fell really hard out of love, and so it was very hard for me to watch this show and just see all of those things and feel very differently about them than I used to. But I do want to particularly point out the stupidest fucking pettiest scene of all time, which is that there's a bunch of ladies. If you've never seen the show, there's ladies with powers. There's different powers. They're all weird. There's one lady whose whole deal is she's just giant. That's it. She's giant. CGI looks really weird. She's big in every room. Everyone's like, whoa, she's big. She's a giant lady. And one of them turns things to glass, I guess. Nobody knows what her deal is, but she sits there at a table with a plate of grapes, and she just turns them to glass and smashes each grape over and over and over again. And what I would like to let you know is that table grapes did not exist until the 20th century.
But see, that's the kind of trivia we need. Out these fallacies.
We can shut it down right now, folks. We are not going to get any better than that read. That is fucking amazing. Thank you.
Amazing. Oh my gosh.
But who doesn't want to have, when you're frustrated, take some grapes, turn them into glass, and smash them? Like, that's catharsis.
It's a nice thought, isn't it? But
it really is.
Yeah, a man named Thompson was responsible for that, and it wouldn't happen for a couple more decades. So
thank you. I love this. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Seriously, star wipe. Well, thank you all. I'm going to move on to Johnny's first pick, which go ahead, take it away.
All right. So my first pick for this season is actually going to be, it's kind of a downer, but it's an amazing show. It's a Sin, which is on HBO Max. So if you don't know much about it, It's a Sin takes place in 1981 through 1991 in London and follows a group of queer and queer ally friends as they are kind of navigating the beginning of the HIV/AIDS crisis that did strike the entire world. One of the things that really stuck out for me, the thing I really loved, was some of the realism in the relationships. So the main character, who was played by Ali Alexander from years and years, Richie. So there's really three main characters. There's Richie, Roscoe, who's played by Omar Douglas, and then Jill, who was their friend, played by Lydia West, who I thought was in the Easy on Me video by Adele, which is not. Someone looks very much like her. Anyway, so they're kind of the core friendship of the group. There are a lot of people who come in and unfortunately could come out of the group in different times, but one of the things is just the realism. And one of the things in the first episode was when Ollie was having his first sexual experience. He is a fresh-faced kid off of the Isle of Wight, which is just the Cape of England, and he was having his first sexual experience, and he did not freshen up where he needed to freshen up. And as a gay man of that, when I was that age, I kind of had the same kind of experience. So I fell for it. And I thought the realism of that really hard, that's like really excitement, but then completely getting thrown down, broken out, and realizing that this is not the magical first time experience I really wanted to have. But as the show goes on, there's a little bit of, and even unfortunately, a parallel between now and then was within the second episode, people started dying and getting really sick. No one was knowing what was happening. But there was some denial that, there's nothing wrong. People are, I'm going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen to me. I don't need to protect myself. I don't need to do anything. And actually, Richie, the main character, it just sets the tone for the entire show. It's like, something's going to happen to him. However, the way that the group supported themselves as friends were dying, and one character who was Colin, if you watch the show, you just fall in love with Colin. He's this little boy from Wales, and he's so sweet and so endearing, and he's the one who he's the good boy, and he ends up dying, and he feels like, and he even looks at his mother and he's like, I don't want to be dirty, and she's like, you're not dirty. And I just started crying because that happened so little at that time, is that families who were supportive, there's so many sons and daughters who were just dying on beds because their families had shunned them, and it hit something really real. One of the things I remember seeing was a post from my drag mother who is about 15 years older than me, and just saying it's hard for her to watch because it was so real of the life that she lived. I'm fortunate that I didn't get to live that. However, I am so glad I got a little bit of a glimpse into it. And the character of Jill, I feel like at first you don't really understand what her purpose there is. However, you see that overall she ends up becoming the caretaker of the entire group, and she is based off of Russell T Davies and one of his friends, Jill. It's very loosely based, but she was part of this group of nurses in the 80s and 90s who were unabashed, unashamed, unafraid to take on HIV/AIDS patients. And the one other thing is the soundtrack is killer.
The soundtrack is amazing.
Oh my God. So from Joy Division to Belinda Carlisle, it's, you can put that on and you can divorce yourself from all the sadness, because it really gets you pumped up to that excitement and the fun of the club scene in the 80s and the early 90s.
Yeah. So I listened to the soundtrack. I actually will confess I hadn't watched this yet because everyone I know who saw it said it was amazing, but it's a real bummer. And I think it came out like February, March. And I was like, I'm completely filled up with bummer. I can't do it right now. And also I kind of did live that. I mean, I came kind of towards the end of the situation, but I will say, first of all, did anybody else on this podcast watch It's Ascent?
Yes, I've seen it. Did
you enjoy it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the performances are so strong, and it is a show that I had a sort of complicated read on. I mean, I'm not going to rehash. I wrote a whole review of it. I think it's a beautiful show in a lot of ways, and I think particularly because the performances are so effective, you cannot come away not feeling moved by it, is sort of my top line reaction to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say I have every intention of watching it. It's just I have to be in the right headspace to do so. But I will. The thing that I'm so pleased that, number one, you brought this into the podcast, and number two, it exists, or whichever, the other way around, is between this and, say, Pose. I do think one of the weird things about gay history is that it's not something that's passed down, right? Like, you have to, if you're a gay person who's coming out, you have to actively seek that out. Otherwise, you're generally unaware. And we're now at least a generation removed from the AIDS epidemic as we knew it in the end of the 20th century. So there are a lot of these kids coming out, and I'm sure, Jonny, there's it's fine, I'm on PrEP. And people have no concept of what this scourge was and how it wiped out an entire generation of gay men. So I'm grateful that this is out, this Pose is out there to make sure that this younger generation is aware, we've been through some serious shit, and you need to understand that the survivors, first of all, you need to pay them some respect. And secondly, you have to take real responsibility for your own health, and be aware of the risks out there. So I'm glad that these shows exist for that reason.
Yeah, and the agency. I think that's one of the things, is that no one else is going to do it for you. You have to be your own champion and be your own protector. I will say, Amma, I do know that you are a big HBO Max fan, and this is the show that got me to actually subscribe to HBO Max. So
yeah, it's shaken out that way. Like, I didn't really expect it, and then looking at all of my shows, I was like, yes, I am.
Yeah, so I just want to let you know, I came for It's a Sin and I stayed for a lot of other things. So
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Very cool. Yeah, it's another one where I think I'm very much in the same headspace as Eric, of like, my sister watched it and is like, it is very heavy. So like, it is on the list, and at some point I will be in a space where I can get into it and enjoy it. But I've heard wonderful things and can't wait to.
Yeah, I wanted to get this one out of the way so I didn't end everything with this, so we can at least lighten it up later on.
Appreciate that. And a quick little sidebar. So pleased that Russell T Davies is coming back to save Doctor Who.
Yay.
Thank God.
Like the best news of the year almost. So with that being said, I'm going to go on to Kate, your first pick.
All right. So my first pick is Get Back. And I was like, this is a TV show, right?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a TV
Yes,
show.
it is.
It's, a
Okay.
7-hour+hour 3-part documentary by Peter Jackson about that time in 1969 when the Beatles like got together for literally a month in Twickenham Studios and were like, hey, we got to cut an album. And they were really going through growing pains and about to break up. And then eventually they did cut an album. It became Let It Be, but it didn't come out for a couple of years. They did Abbey Road first. Anyway, so when I say I cried watching this, what I mean is I wept. and Eric's knowledge of my teenage Beatlemaniac self, it's This Week We Can Drink. I was a teenager when the anthologies came out, and I just was completely enamored by everything having to do with the Beatles. I just am so grateful for the artistry that they produce, that's wildly inventive and beautiful and strange and complicated as artists themselves, especially my favorite, John Lennon, super complicated human being. To have that kind of in my growing up, it just means so much to me. So to get this incredibly hypnotic, lightly edited, seems like, but also extremely well edited. There were like hours and hours of this, and we actually did get a narrative, right, of them being 4 incredibly talented, successful human beings who have lived through this outrageous experience, who clearly love each other and are clearly growing apart. And but still, despite all that, like, are just like pulling songs out of the ether. And, maybe like George can work on something, but no, we have to rehearse the long and frickin' winding road again, Paul. Like, just that level of like detail was so satisfying to watch. It was so moving to me. And just like the progression to start from, as my dear friend Sean said, they came into that studio with jack shit, and in weeks they were on a rooftop and they sounded like the best band in the world. And like, it was just so moving to me. But I'm going to close with also a quote from Vulture's Craig Jenkins, which I feel like really encapsulated why I think this is such an extraordinary piece of television. And to me specifically, really, Craig Jenkins says, Get Back is a show about process and compromise and the mercurial nature of creativity and the value of an edifying work-life balance. Sometimes, often, great work takes time, and inspiration won't show face until distractions in your periphery are sufficiently quieted. There's just no predicting what will happen when you sit down to create, no telling what you're in for. And as a sort of like found document that like both demystifies so much about that period in the Beatles' history, and also like is a real portrait of just artists working. Oh my God. I loved it.
And Kate, I don't think you said this is on Disney.
It's on Disney Plus, yeah. Yes.
I do. So can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
When Kate was a teenager, she was an illustrator, and she did a print that had how many Beatles references in the print?
Over 100. I'm literally looking at it right now.
Wow.
Yes.
Whoa.
So
Holy Ringo Batman.
Right. And I'm going to need Kate to send me a good version of that image.
I will.
So that we can put that up on our social media.
Eric's even in it. He's in the Sgt. Pepper scene, like little teenage Eric.
amazing.
But I think that would be something to share with our readers.
Yes.
So thank you,
You're
Kate.
welcome.
Did anybody else have any other thoughts on Get Back?
My kids love Get Back. I love Get Back. My children love Get Back.
Yes.
It's very funny to me. They don't know really much about who the Beatles are, but they have insisted on watching it in 10-minute increments after dinner. My 4-year-old sings Get Back with an accent now. They know it. They know the songs so well that there is a moment when John, he sings 2 notes, he fumbles to add guitar, and then he tries the 2 notes again. And my 4-year-old was like, he's doing Dig a Pony. And I was like, that's right.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Raising the youth
amazing.
correctly.
Like what? That's
Hey, it's
3
way better
generations.
than being into Baby Shark. So
Yeah.
Agreed.
But
Yeah.
that's 3 generations removed from the actual art, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
speaks to, and I don't think this is, saying anything anybody doesn't know, but it speaks to the enduring legacy of that
Yeah.
band.
Also,
Mhm.
yeah, Paul McCartney could get it.
Oh,
in
God.
That, in that.
Oh. You're,
Could and can, just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Oh,
Could and can.
you're
Yeah.
speaking my mother's language. She'll listen to the podcast going forward from here. So
The scene where Paul and John, they love each other so much, where they're singing Two of Us as angry ventriloquists to each other.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's just gold.
Yeah. It is.
amazing.
good.
Yeah.
So we are going to pass it off to Kathryn for her first pick.
Okay, so I will also go chronologically. I liked WandaVision very much. I was really into it. I covered it a lot. But the thing that I was watching at that same time that gave me the thing that I felt like a lot of people were getting from WandaVision was a PBS masterpiece BBC adaptation called All Creatures Great and Small.
Ooh.
Yes.
So good.
It is, if you are unfamiliar, it is an adaptation of a bunch of books that were written in the 30s and 40s, maybe all the way to the 50s, by a veterinarian whose pen name was James Herriot. They were largely autobiographical, but just loosely fictionalized enough so that everyone could go on with their lives. And they were then adapted into a BBC miniseries that was very popular in the 1970s. The premise is that he is a rural vet in the Yorkshire Dales. And in the very beginning of the first, the beginning of the new version, it is the young James Herriot who has taken this job in Yorkshire. He's Scottish. It's his very first job. He's never really lived away from home before. He has practiced. He's been a veterinary student, but he really has no idea what an actual rural practice is like. He moves in with and is a junior vet to a guy named Siegfried Farnan, who's a real ball buster type, doesn't want to believe any sort of other veterinary practices have anything that is worth listening to. And I mean, it is teed up to be the most middle of the road. You're yeah, okay, it's British people next to cows. I got it. I kind of understand
But also
the genre.
It's amazing to me. So
I understand the genre. I'm going to put it on and I'm going to listening to their accents and they're going to drink a lot of tea and my brain's not going to have to do anything. And let me tell you, by the end of the first episode, I was gripping the furniture. I was so emotionally overwhelmed by this one guy who, I mean, the stakes are both extremely small and so intense. It is whether or not this animal that is somebody's livelihood is going to die. And often they do die. It is so sad. And the physicality of it is really intense. And I think everything anybody goes to Ted Lasso for, where it's but it's a non-toxic depiction of masculinity. This show fucking blows that out of the water. And it is just the most exquisite. Like, you could also imagine all of the ways that you could do a show like this and be like, yeah, whatever. All of Britain looks kind of like the 1930s. But like, every piece of the production is so lovingly made. The performances are, I mean, just, it's so hard to nail a show like this so that it hits all of the sentimental notes, but doesn't have that intense, super sweet saccharine thing. And it absolutely nails it. And I almost know, because of my job, there are few shows that I watch more than once. A lot of them I don't even fully finish. But this one I watched like fully twice and would happily sit down and watch a third time. I just think it's exquisite. And that's All Creatures Great and Small.
And Kate, you loved on this show too.
Ugh, it's so good. Exquisite and lovely is exactly the way to talk about it. And it's sort of like life and death in a teacup, right? Like, it is life and death, whether or not these animals survive for livelihood or just because someone loves them dearly. It's just so beautifully made with such care and intention. And yeah, it's like a hug that is not lying to you about what's really going on.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
who's been hugging you, Kate? That sounds very intense.
No. I meant like it's not like it's a comforting, but it's clear-eyed. It's a clear-eyed kind of comfort.
Yeah, so much escapism. I mean, I have written about, and I know there's sort of this idea of comfort TV as a thing that we all like. Everyone wants comfort TV. They want to turn on fucking Emily in Paris and then just like not look at the world, right? And the thing with this show is that it hits all of those comfort notes, but it's not going to let you look away from the world in the same way.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's very different, but I feel like The Great in some ways kind of hit that for me too, where I was like, this is so pleasurable and also so violent. Like, I can't, I don't get the pleasure without the violence, right? Like, it's good stuff.
Well, excellent. So speaking of small things, we're actually going to take a quick break, and we will be right back for round 2 of our picks after these messages. Welcome back to the Best of 2021 TV episode. We're going to move right on to our second round of picks. Amma, you're up again.
Okay, so my next pick is season 2 of Love Life. Also, was my first pick HBO? Now I don't remember, but this one is on HBO.
No, your first pick was Disney Plus.
Okay, thank you. What I'll say is this, and we've talked a little bit about having a sense of what TV is for you and what TV is not for you. The idea of a quirky but conventionally attractive white woman like having a hard time in love was not super attractive to me, so I did not watch season 1 of Love Life. But season 2 of Love Life, William Jackson Harper's romantic lead, I had wanted that for quite a while. So it was one of those things where if you define your brand loudly enough on the internet, people will respond to you. So as an example, quick story, but it'll come back around. So in the finale of The Good Place, there is a calendar that Chidi, who's played by William Jackson Harper, makes for Eleanor. And the NBC store does not sell it. I yelled at them online several times. I was like, it would be the easiest money grab in the world for you to make this calendar, and I would buy one for every consecutive year that it existed. So I was very upset. And this was like in February of that year. And then in August for my birthday, one of my roommates got the calendar made for me through Shutterfly.
Oh, God.
That's amazing.
Nice.
So to say that I wanted William Jackson Harper as a romantic lead, like in my house, as a decorative item, very serious.
So you found your new good place.
Essentially, yes. So I was in from the beginning, is what I'm saying for that. But I also think that as I was watching it, the idea of a love story for a Black male romantic lead was something that like we don't necessarily see touched as often. The way that they go through, like from an anthology perspective, each romantic relationship and what it meant to him, as well as how perception of race kind of impacts all of those things. It was just really fun and interesting and intricate to watch, and it felt really fresh. And Jessica Williams, who plays one of the main romantic leads, you see her pop up a couple times, is fantastically charismatic, and we haven't been seeing enough of her in recent years, so I really enjoyed that.
Hard agree.
I love her.
Yeah, she's fantastic, and they're so good together. And then in particular, their pandemic episode, I think, is among one of the best ones that I've seen. Like, it's up there with Mythic Quest, which had an exceptional one. And it was the same kind of thing where it kind of hit upon so many pieces of the pandemic, like sharing space with people who are taking it at different levels of seriousness, the feeling of what it is like to spend parts of the pandemic by yourself, that feeling when kind of like the loneliness and isolation of the pandemic then conflicted directly with the racial uprising. And then all of those things about like working for a company that wants to say the right things to the public but can't say the right things to its own people. And there were so many pieces of it that I just hadn't seen portrayed on TV really well or at all. And it just hit at the series at like just the right point. And then the resolution of it was also really nice. So I just think it was a really fun and interesting season of television on its own. And I'm always really interested in like individual seasons of TV that can stand on their own. And I think it's just a really great, tight 10 episodes, fairly straightforward to watch. And I really, really enjoyed it.
Had anybody else watched Love Life?
I haven't, no.
It's on my list.
Yeah, one of the like maybe tippy top of things that I have not had a chance to watch, and I'm very sad about it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did you go from Anna Kendrick to William Jackson Harper and Harper, as the leads? Like, that seems kind of interesting, like going from season 1 to season 2. Are they different worlds? How does it work?
So it's in the same universe, and essentially there's like a handoff of sorts where the end of the first season was, and I don't know that it spoils anything to say this, but like a wedding for Anna Kendrick's character and the man that she ends up picking. So the wedding party, they kind of hand off. So she's in a bar for their wedding party. She goes up to the bar. William Jackson Harper comes up because his wife works with Anna Kendrick's character. So they kind of like pass for a moment in those spaces. They interact a few other times in the series, but it's an interesting kind of handoff. And it's like, it's very clear that they're in the same world, but they don't interact with each other very much.
That's really cool. So there's intention there, and it's an anthology, but it's still
connected.
Very much all connected. I love that. That's really fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Amma, for putting it on my radar. Because I'll be honest, like I maybe had heard about the Anna Kendrick version, but I had not watched it. But you've sold me very convincingly, so thank you.
Sure.
I will go for my next pick, which is Arcane League of Legends on Netflix. And if you had told me a month ago that I would be putting a cartoon in my top 3, much less a cartoon about a video game, I would have been insulted. And yet here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. I'll be very clear. I've never played League of Legends. I don't know anything about it. I don't even know where I would find it. That's the video game that this series is based on. I only watched this because I think I was watching Great British Bake Off, and after you finish watching an episode, Netflix puts on a commercial for something else, and this popped up, and I was like, what is this animation style? It's beautiful. And so, I started to watch it, and I said to my partner, I was like, have you ever played this League of Legends game? He's like, no, I've heard of it, but we'll try it. And the animation is incredibly lush. There's something about it. It was also, I was like, this feels very French to me. And sure enough, it's a French animation studio. And it is, that's the thing that hooks you first, is just how beautiful. If you've seen the Spider-Verse film and thought that animation was interesting to you, this is like that, but amplified with kind of, I feel like borderline Art Nouveau style French influences. It's really beautiful. Like I can't sell this highly enough. And I'm not that good at describing art. Sorry, Kate.
That's okay.
But it's not just the standard form. They also they're very inventive, and they play with different styles of animation. There's one character that's having a mental health crisis, and the way that they visually represent that is super interesting. And there's certain action sequences where it's like a completely different show, but it all still works. Like it's seamlessly. And the animators are incredibly skillful storytellers, and I'm blown away. I've never seen anything like it. But the real hook here for me is actually the story, the characters, and the world that it creates. This is a crime drama. It's a class drama. It's a court drama. It's a family drama. It's a dystopian drama. It's all of those things with just unbelievable action sequences. So if you're like the family survival aspects of Walking Dead, you'll get this something similar here without the zombies. If you like the sexually charged politics of Game of Thrones, you'll get that here without the dragons. But it's really the first 3 episodes are actually not the greatest introduction to the show. I will say that, because it's set in the past from where the bulk of the show takes place. It's still, though, in media res. So, like, you're trying to figure out what's going on because there are very complicated relationships that you're expected to kind of figure out very quickly. And then after episode 3, it jumps into kind of quote unquote present day, where these 2 street urchins, it's kind of steampunky. It's the second steampunk pick I did this year, which was
it's like really feeling a vibe for you here.
Not intentional, because that's not my thing usually, but it's kind of like Dickensian street urchins that are going and they accidentally stumble upon this incredible technological magical thing, blah blah blah, that ends up like exploding into this huge new subplot that kind of drives the story forward. But it is riveting. Like, I know this sounds so overhyped for a cartoon about a video game, and yet I'm telling you, it's really good. This, like, I just couldn't stop watching it. We would, like, it'd be 11:30 at night, 12:30 at night, and be like, just go to the next episode. I don't want to stop. Like, every episode has like these gasp-inducing moments. There's terrific villains, flawed but like.
Are they half-hour episodes, or?
I think they're like 45 minutes. Okay. Which is impressive because it's all fairly drawn. I was reading, and I couldn't see an actual statistic for this, but what I was reading was each episode was several $1 million. This was in the works for 6 years, this show. And
no one knows about it? Like,
well, that's the thing. It's hugely popular, right? But it's not hugely popular with most people that you talk to, because it's mostly video game nerds that are watching it. But yeah, it was in their, like, Netflix's top show for the week that it was out, right? In like multiple countries. But nobody else I know is talking about it. But I'm serious. Like, every bit of the time and the money that went into this project is on that screen. It is just incredibly well delivered. You've got Haley Steinfeld as one of the lead characters. The other sister, that voice work, I've never heard of her before. Her name is Ella Parnell, but incredible voice work. And I have to say, if you have not checked it out, if you have any interest in anime, although it's in English, so it's not like you're reading subtitles or anything. Even if you don't care about video games, if you don't care about anything along in those vibes, still give it a shot. Again, the first 3 episodes not super great for getting you in, but once it goes to the present day, I was completely hooked and just gobsmacked by the finale. So that's has nobody else watched that on this panel?
No, I just get more episodes of Great British Bake Off after I finish the new episode. So it's not putting steampunk into my algorithm for some reason. I don't know, but it sounds, my nephew sounds like he'd be really into this.
Well, and it's not putting it into my algorithm either, which is odd because I watch a great deal of animation to the point where it's out of character for me to not have an animated show in my 3 for this episode. But I'm going to seek it out because it sounds like something that I would potentially get really into.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't shown it up for you, because like it kept popping up for us, and finally it's like, let's just give it a shot. So with that being said, I am going to pass the baton over to Johnny for his second pick.
All right, my second pick is definitely not a downer. It's a lot of fun. I think a number of you had already picked this in your tops, but it's Hacks with Gene Smart, and it was on HBO, and wouldn't have known about this without It's a Sin. So I guess everything comes from something sad becomes something great. So let's very briefly talk about it, because I don't know if everyone's seen it, but Jean Smart is playing Deborah Vance, who is the kind of the queen of Las Vegas comedy, who has been at her hotel, the Palmetto, for 2,500 shows, and she has a loyal following of housewives from across the country, and then she quickly finds out that her show is being replaced by Pentatonics.
The indignity of it all.
I'm gonna be quiet because I'm joining the Gay Men's Chorus, because I'm sure some of them have loved that, but I'm moving along. So then Ava Daniels, who is she's a comedy writer, and she ends up getting kind of canceled very early on, and she is brought in to be a joke writer for her because she really has no other options. And it's only because her agent is also Deborah Vance's agent. The one thing I actually love about that is the fact that the agent is basically beholden to the dim-witted secretary receptionist who is the daughter of the owner of the agency. So, which really cracked me up. I was like, nepotism is a real thing. And it was like, I was like, it's kind of cartoonish, but not really, because this happens all the time. Someone with no experience, no reason to be there is actually calling the shots. So anyway, she flies in, and I think the thing that I enjoyed about it the most is the fact that both of them are so headstrong and really have kind of a bit of a diluted sense of where they actually are and what their place in life is right now. Deborah Vance still thinks that she can really do no wrong. She has been at the top of her game for so many years, but really at this point, she is really a shadow of her former self, and she's at the end of her career. Ava is still also kind of deluded to the fact that she thinks it's just a one and done. She's nothing. She really is just, she's a hack, hence the name. And she really has done a disservice for women in comedy, that she's nothing more than a QVC seller of caftans, which a caftan in Las Vegas is perfect. So absolutely. She knew her audience right there. But some of the other characters in there, you learn a lot about, the dynamic, her, like Marcus, who is Deborah Vance's chief operating officer. The fact that you have a chief operating officer just shows that's the level that you're at. And he has a very complicated relationship. And you start to find out that he started out as a fan of hers and became her COO over time. And that there is that magnetism, there is that hilarity, that root gut knowledge that you have to have as a comedian that made it so endearing, because she's a fucking terrible person, but she's real. That's the one thing she is. She's leaving Ava in the middle of the desert, taking a helicopter to tell her to go figure out, take the car back home after it breaks down, and tricks Ava into buying an antique from a dealer who absolutely despises everything that Deborah Vance stands for. But you know what, though? That's who she is. I think over the course of the season, I really banged it out in 2 days because it was just so engaging. So one thing is that you just really get to understand that the person who I really at first empathized with was Ava, because like, oh, she wants to get her start. But at the end, I was rooting for Deborah. I was like, she is the character who is exactly who she is. She's not going to change, with all of her imperfections, being a horrible mother, kind of a terror of a boss, and really not that good of a person. She is who she is. She is real. She has fears, and she has this vulnerability that you really start to get to see. And at the very end of the season, you kind of see that Ava's almost about to betray her in a way that is going to be detrimental, and this is a great setup for the second season. I mean, some of the other characters in there, just some of the side characters with Mark and Delicato, that was from Ugly Betty, and it's just, he's grown up. He was the nephew from the show, and he's now this grown up sassy as hell gay boy, and is Deborah's personal assistant. And I just love that little tie-ins for that. And then Johnny Sibley is the water maintenance worker who ends up having a little bit of a side affair with Marcus, which is just kind of more silly and just an excuse to have Johnny Sibley take his shirt off, which I have no problem
no problems.
with.
Very
that
much
not a problem. So I am completely 100% in on it, and I cannot wait for a second season. And really, Jean Smart, I mean, going back to designing women, she has just crafted a career that is unlike anyone. She does comedy, she can do drama, she really can't do any wrong, and I am so glad she had a renaissance in 2021.
Yeah, I defy you to tell me one bad performance with Jean Smart. Anyone?
Nope, don't have it.
Nope. They don't exist. Nope. She doesn't do those.
Nope. It doesn't exist.
No.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned it's the Renaissance, but this is really the era of Jean Smart. And I loved this show. It was on my top 3. I let Johnny have it because I'm nice. I'm pleasant, damn it. But no, like for me, like what I loved about the show was the frank observations of the differences between millennials and boomers, which I thought slapped both ways, but were also very good at showcasing why both of those generations have qualities that should be admired, because Deborah is a hard worker, and that's the thing they kind of really like. She earned everything that she got, and you had a lot taken away from her.
She did. And you know what? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, there was a scene, the best scene I think in the entire series was when she was at that small comedy club, and there was the douchey bro who was think he's just so funny. He thinks he's so funny, and she pays him $1 million to never do comedy ever again. And I defy that any female comedian, and even I've done a little bit of stand-up too, and I would defy anyone who is not a straight white bro who would love to have $1 million to tell one horrible piece of shit like that to never do comedy ever again.
Do we have to limit it to one? We have an actual stand-up comic on this podcast. Amma, did you watch Hacks?
I did watch Hacks, and I came across it because once something comes out that's about stand-up comedy and people know you do stand-up comedy, they will beat you into submission into watching it.
Yes.
And I had been burned by this principle before because a lot of people told me I would love Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. So then people are like, have you seen Hacks? Have you seen Hacks? I'm like, again? But I did go into it, and I really, really liked it. I think that, again, some of the generational pieces of it, and this even goes back to like other stuff that I had been doing earlier in the year. Like one of the best books I read was When Women Invented Television, and it talks about like 5 seminal women in the early stages of TV that essentially gave us the landscape that we have now. So thinking about like generationally what women in the position of Deborah Vance in early stages of comedy did to pave the way for women that are doing it now was really, really interesting to me. And I do agree that like it cuts both ways, and it was really fun to kind of see that interplay, which was something of a theme for TV this year. It's happened more than once, and I know we'll probably get to it later with other examples of it. But yeah, it was so much fun and so interesting. And then again, too, like it was one I'd kind of been watching out for because the creators and writers of it are members of the teams that did Broad City as well as The Good Place. So I was like, it's got the component parts that I want. I just have to see if I'm going to like it. And I loved it.
I'm so glad. I was hoping that you did.
And real quick point to that, who would you pay? Like the week that episode came out, I asked a ton of female comedians, like, who would you pay $1 million to stop doing comedy? The answers were illuminating, and none of them were wrong. So if anybody wants those off air, we can do that at a later date. But the candidates are numerous.
I bet. Well, thank you. I want to keep things moving, so I want to go to Kate for your second pick.
All right, so my second pick is Only Murders in the Building. So, like, if you had told me that in 2021 there would be a murder mystery television show set in a grand old apartment building in New York City with Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez as a trio of true crime loving sleuths, I'd be like, why the hell am I not writing this show?
Right?
But it just, I kind of like came into it. I was like, is this gonna, like, are they gonna pull it off? Like, it just seems like, I don't know. And like, they pulled it off. They really pulled it off. It is an absolutely delightful show. Some episodes are better than others, but like as soon as that frozen cat came out of the freezer, I was like, well, this Evelyn's frozen corpse is the sign that yes, I am in for your show. I just rewatched it with my parents. It's really great rewatch. It just reaffirms how clever and satisfying and how well crafted kind of all of the mystery components are, and also how sweet it is and how sad it is and how deeply, deeply rooted it is in character and in sense of place, right? Like just seeing, and I felt the same way when I was watching the rooftop concert and Get Back. I was like, look at all the people on the street of the city. Like it just, I still miss that. We're always going to miss that feeling, right, of the city before, any city before. Not that like we can't go to a city now, but it's just like that just gave me a feeling of like community when I'm still really missing it. Been a stan for Steve Martin since Roxanne, which I think makes me a rock stan. And yes, I was like 7 years old. So good. And like, and he and Marty Short, like they're just, are so good together, and Selena Gomez was completely charming, I thought, with all of them in there together. And also there's just like a bassoonist femme fatale. Sorry, spoilers. Like it's just, I really loved it. It's something I didn't see coming in 2021, and I'm glad that a ton of people watched it because it was really charming.
So good. And we didn't mention Nathan Lane.
Oh, God, yes.
So good.
So good. And Sting. Like, so good.
And Sting, yeah.
But
Tina Fey.
Yeah, Tina Fey. I mean,
also,
we're just naming
Amy Ryan. Amy Ryan. Yeah, Jane Lynch as Saz Pataki, like
amazing. Oh my
Steve
god,
Martin
so
stunt
good.
double and keeps stealing all of his women, which is
incredible.
And her physical performance in that episode, well, both of them, every time they're just like mirroring each other. God, it was so funny. And also in the very last episode, without giving too many spoilers, the scene where Steve Martin is like trying to get into the elevator, I was just crying laughing.
It gave real on Vatsnik from Father of the Bride Part 2, and I was like, yes, perfect.
It's like,
I'm totally in for the fact that they swapped out Chevy Chase for Selena Gomez.
Oh my goodness, yes. These are the three amigos that I want in my 2022.
100% absolutely. No, it is a show of people who are really good at their craft, just luxuriating.
And kind of like clearly they had ambitions for it, but not like they're just trying to say something about people, right? Like I feel like it had a good sort of match of ambition to genre, to mode, right? Like it wasn't overreaching, I thought. And anyways, oh God, and the episode with Nathan Lane's son, where it's all so good.
Yeah,
it's an incredible individual piece of television. Like every now and again, there's like one episode of something, and you're like, they've done something so beautiful with this, and it was so fantastic.
People in the city talk too fucking much.
I feel very seen. But with that being said, this takes the investigation in a whole new direction. So I am going to pass it to Kathryn for her second pick.
So the show one of the shows that I was most surprised by actually is a drama on Apple TV Plus called For All Mankind. I watched the first season and felt like it was an interesting show, but it took a while to find itself, and in fact took so long to find itself in the first season that you were sort of still in this place where you were wondering if it knew what kind of show it was. In the very beginning, it is a very simple premise, which is like, what if the space race, except the Russians got to the moon first? And you're like, well, that's a sort of interesting thought experiment. What if? And for too long, the answer is like, yeah, not a lot's different. Like, and as a television show, obviously that like creates problems from a momentum standpoint. Their chief move there is to say that because the Russians send women to space, the United States also then includes women in the space program. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. I love an astronaut, love a lady astronaut. And it sort of accelerates in the first season to the point where they establish a moon base, but it really, you're like, I can't, it is the alternate history kind of story where you're waiting for the part where it's interesting that it's an alternate history. In the second season, there is a jump forward in time a little bit, and it is so much more fully itself. You have a established space program that in so many ways echoes and like is familiar from and has some characters in history from, you know, the 60s and early 70s. In the space program, there are sort of like big important space race and Cold War events that get pulled in through the series. Some of the most terrifying parts for me are how realistic the deep fakes are of historical figures. It makes me very upset about the possibilities and also our democracy. However, great for fiction. But what I truly did not see coming is that like by the end of that second season, it is operating at like unbelievable 2000s prestige cable drama plotting thing, that thing where you get to the last episode and you're like, oh shit, all the plots are coming together. Like, and you're just on the floor, like all of these things that they have actually been seeding for so long that you didn't even realize are like being pulled together in this beautifully orchestrated final sort of set piece. So many set pieces all next to each other. I don't want to spoil, but something happens in that last episode involving duct tape that I like laid on the floor and was like yelling, and my husband was like, what is wrong with you? And I was just yelling like, the duct tape though, the duct tape. And he did not find that illuminating. But that show,
duct tape, woo.
That show, I can't. Yeah, it fucking slaps, that show. It's so good.
I just got a new giant, inspired by you, Kathryn. I don't even know if I told you this yet. I got a giant TV on sale, Target, Black Friday.
Ooh,
it's huge. It's not as big as yours.
Come on,
giant
business
TV.
lady.
Yeah, I got a job.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and it comes with like Apple on it, which before I just was watching like I watched Dickinson on my iPad, which actually is a great place. It's a really intimate show to watch on your iPad.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good size for that. Yeah.
But I am excited to go back to start watching Space Show because I'm kind of in that first season rut where I'm like, this is interesting, and Joel Kinnaman is in this.
Well, it's so fascinating that we do keep trying to make Joel Kinnaman.
Yes,
we do.
He's always there. Like,
so many attempts.
Yes, he's in this, and he's in period. It's Ron Moore too, isn't it? It's Ron Moore. Yeah.
It is Ron Moore. By the way, second season, I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, Ron Moore, fuck yeah.
So anyway, this I can now watch it on my giant TV, which feels like that's where Moon Show, Space Show should live.
Moon Show does belong there. Yes.
Sure.
I'm really excited to see this because I'm a huge alternate history fan, and half of my YouTube watching is either it's alternate history and the other half is drag race stuff. So
sure, yes.
I mean, it's like you can't get enough of those Edwards. But the one problem I have with it is that a lot of it's really thought out. It's really, people are digging into history and they really are uncovering some really interesting ideas. Unfortunately, it goes into a very scary libertarian viewpoint rather than just kind of following how the world was going at that point. Yeah. So this seems to be taking it out from that really scary precipice that I would rather not talk about. Yeah. So I'm very fat because there is something to say. It's like, take one piece of history and tweak it just a little bit. And at first it doesn't seem like it's anything, but it is that butterfly effect that everything changes from there.
It's so great. The other thing, I mean, Ron Moore also, there's all kinds of little tiny cultural stuff that like didn't need to change, but he just did change because why not? I don't have any reason why. And one of them is that he just randomly decided the Beatles never broke up, which I think is
that the thing that happens in the last episode? They just don't break up?
That is one of the things. That is one of the parts of the thing.
He holds them together physically with duct tape. That's the thing.
But did the Rolling Stones then break up in 1970?
These are the questions.
That's okay, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's like that moment in Get Back where you're like, I can see a future where they just did this. Anyway. Yes.
Well, that sounds great. I will admit that I've been holding off on Apple TV Plus until I can get like a really good, solid group of shows that I know I'm going to dig. And so that sounds like one. And the other one I've been told is amazing is Foundation. All right, good to know. Dickinson. There we go. Okay. And that one does look great. So with that, we are going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back with our final round of picks for best TV shows of the year. We will be right back. We are back with the last round of our Best of 2021 television episode. Before we wrap things up, I want to ask our panel, where can people find you on social media? Amma?
I am best on Twitter and Instagram at Amma Marfo, both places.
Great. And Jonny?
I am on pretty much everything. Jonny Minogue, one word, no H, spelled like Kylie.
And Kate?
So I am on Twitter at Kate Racculia occasionally. But if you want to see cute cat pictures, I'm on Instagram at Gomez Rack. That is my cat. He is very handsome.
He is very handsome, and we endorse the cat pics. And Kathryn, how about you?
I am way too much on Twitter at Kate VanArendonk.
And you can find me at Eric Rezsnyak on all of the things. And make sure you're following at culture_debate on Twitter and at Great Pop Culture Debate on Instagram. So with that being said, we're going to get back into this final picks. Amma, what's up?
Okay, so this is a show that came out late enough in the year that I was like, oh shit, when it was good enough that it had to shuffle the rest of my list. But I'm going to pick Southside Season 2. So Season 1 of Southside originally aired on Comedy Central, and it was one of two shows, along with the other two, that moved over to HBO for its second season. And both of those shows leveled up for their second seasons, and it's always really nice to see a show that you already really enjoy just get better. Southside hit another level this year, just so dense with jokes, so silly, so specific. For those who aren't familiar with it, it is like a buddy comedy with two guys that live in the south side of Chicago who work for like a rent-to-own business. So like furniture we rent, lamps and things like that. But they also have side hustles because they don't want that to be their only job. So there's one episode where they rent furniture out for like a party promoter who's holding a party for another party promoter that had just recently passed away. So it's like part funeral, part like celebration of life. There's one where they decide that they can use the truck as an ambulance and kind of like pay on the side for people that don't want to use actual ambulances. And it's just so silly. They have like a relationship with the police as well. So there are like two police officers that are kind of part of their world. They have excellent guest stars. Lil Rel Howery's shown up a couple times. Chance the Rapper shows up.
I love him.
And his episode is fantastic. Like he writes a play and they're trying to stage it while everybody's in the basement of the store for a tornado, and everybody like gives him constructive criticism, so it comes out with a different version of the play. It's amazing. But yeah, it's one of those things that the first season was really funny and like really specific to like certain pieces of Chicago, and then this season they had a really elaborate Ferris Bueller tribute episode, which was amazing because John Hughes more or less famously didn't believe black people existed in Chicago, which is crazy when you say it as a sentence. Yeah. So Ferris Bueller through the eyes of black characters who get to enjoy Chicago is like a very different thing, but it's got all of those references that like make it perfect. And yeah, and it's so funny. And like, it's just a good reminder that like anything that Basar, Salahuddin, and Diallo Riddle, who also do Sherman Showcase, which is another amazing show, everything they touch, we should watch all the time. It's fantastic.
Awesome. Has anybody else watched this one?
I just started watching the first season, and honestly, it's because of what you had kind of put out there. And I was curious to see what it was about. And because I also saw that the episodes were pretty short, they're only like 20 minutes or so. Mm-hmm. And I started giggling incessantly. Like these are the people from the South Side I wanted to see, unlike the Gallaghers this season. So I absolutely loved it. I didn't get into season 2 yet. I just got into season 1, but I am already hooked. Everything about it. It's just, there's a little bit of the little wacky. There is a little grittiness. There's almost kind of like a bit of a Superstore vibe to it. And first, it's like they're all like huddled in the break room, but it's like Superstore, but like much more gritty, and I love it. And it still has that wackiness of it, but honestly, it's just so well done, and I didn't want it to end. The only reason why I did is because it was about 4:30 in the morning, and I had to get to work the next day. So that was the only reason why I turned it off. So I'm so glad I got turned on to Southside this year.
I'm very glad that you did. And yeah, it's like a really good spiritual successor to something like Broad City or like Detroiters, which I love Detroiters so much. And it's got like that same kind of soul to it.
Oh my God, Detroiters.
Oh, and I miss it all the time. So this is like the closest spiritual successor to that. And man, they're firing at such a high level this year. Like it's actually now starting to show up on like best of the year lists. And I'm like, thank God people aren't overlooking it because it's so good.
It really is. And it's I had never heard of it, and the fact that it's now starting to get a little bit more praise that it really rightly deserves, it's fantastic, and I hope more people see it.
Tell everybody. I'm telling everybody.
I will.
Tell it.
Southside.
We should do a podcast about it. That's what we should do. Thank you, Amma. That's great. So I will go on to my second pick, which is What We Do in the Shadows Season 3 on FX. You can also watch it on Hulu. So I had actually never watched an episode of this show prior to 2021. Because I am a classless idiot with no taste.
So it would seem. Sorry.
Yeah.
But...
Join the classless side over here.
Exactly. But I always knew I would like it. It's just I couldn't find the time to make it. And then I started to see the promo for season 3, and I was like, you know what? We should just watch this. Just put it on. And so I think we burned through all 20 episodes of seasons 1 and 2 in maybe 2 nights. They're just so easy to watch. It's like Pringles, right? And just instantly hooked. And then season 3 came along, and what I thought was already a very solid, weird, funny little show, in my opinion, blossomed in season 3 into something really incredible. And I just so in love with the season. If you aren't aware, this is a mockumentary that follows a group of vampires, 3 actual vampires, their human caretaker and their energy vampire roommate, who live in Staten Island, New York. Taika Waititi is one of the creators, and it's based off of a movie starring him, although you do not have to have watched that to enjoy the show. It's a completely different set of characters, although his character does make some cameos. That said, it is on Hulu. Highly recommend watching it. It's hilarious. It's all of the kind of raw material that was in the show, but just with a completely different set of vampires. The first 2 seasons were absurd and broadly comic, but in my opinion, this season they really honed in on both the comedy and also the soul of the characters. And that's a kind of weird thing to say about vampires, but each of the leads got a really satisfying personal arc that made for wonderful television. You've got the former gypsy Nadia, who is enshrined as the co-leader of the Vampiric Council, and she gets reacquainted with her human soul, which now resides in a terrifying animated doll. You have my personal favorite, centuries-old Middle Eastern warlord Nandor, who yearns for mortal love and confidential to Nandor. I am waiting. I am not that far from Staten Island. You can get it whenever you want it. Like 100.
And you can go there for free.
Absolutely. You get on the ferry. You can get on this ferry.
Atta girl.
In addition to his yearning for connection, he also contemplates the realities of living forever. Guillermo, their familiar, who is unwittingly the most accomplished vampire hunter in the tri-state area, who continues to come into his own. And God bless him, British Ponce Laszlo and energy vampire Colin Robinson cement a most unlikely friendship, culminating in a shocking final cliffhanger that absolutely left me speechless. But this season had so many incredible moments, from the Cloak of Duplication bit with Kate VanArendonk, who is Nandor, acting out all of the other characters pretending to be Nandor, which was amazing. And it really showed off, like, he's got comic chops, because that's a tour de force of different performances there. That horrifying siren encounter between Laszlo and Colin Robinson, the Bonkers Wellness Center episode with Cree Summer killing it as the quote post-vampire leader. And then to me, the high point of the whole thing was the episode where the sire, who's like the progenitor of all vampires, escapes from the vampire council, and they have to hunt him down. And you've got the regular group plus the Count, which I'm not going to get into the whole Count thing, because that's a whole thing, tracking him down to a sporting goods store and trying to get him back under control. And it's just classic. You've got Laszlo and the swallowed harmonica, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But I could not stop laughing.
It killed me. Oh my God. Just,
The Count and the Power Wheels, thinking he was mentally controlling it. The Hellhound, like, the entire episode was A+. And I literally, watching the episode, I was like, this show has hit it. It's hit the peak. It's hit the stride. This is where it needs to be. But for me, ultimately, what made it my show of the year was every Friday since this show has ended, I come home and I get genuinely sad that there's no new What We Do in the Shadows for me to watch. Like, it's actually a moment where I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll find something else. But honestly, I don't think I enjoyed any other show this year as much as I enjoyed What We Do in the Shadows. So if you have not watched it, like myself, stop being a classless bore and check it out on FX and Hulu. I know Amma watched it, clearly. Did anybody else watch this season?
It's my baby.
Did you know?
Nice
I'm going to set you up, Kathryn. Did you know Kathryn talked to Matt Berry?
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, I wrote a profile of Matt Berry this year. It was a good time.
Amazing.
Yeah. No, I think that show is fucking incredible. I think it is the kind of show that is so good that it disguises how hard it is to be that good. And I think there are few things that are better than a comedy that really understands itself and its strengths. I think the finale, Donald Logue shows up in the finale and even thinking about it just makes me want to cry because it's the stupidest fucking jokes. I do think it's worth noting, just a little Easter egg if you didn't know, Matt Berry is a very well-known actor in the UK and is much less known here. He has a show that he plays a semi-fictionalized version of himself called Toast of London, and in the finale he sits down and plays the piano, and it's the Toast of London theme that Matt Berry also wrote because he's also a pop star. He is a legend. Keep going.
So and to that point, when I noticed that, I then tweeted to Kathryn. I was like, "You're the person that knows the answer to this. Is that the theme from Toast of London?" To which she then replied, "Yes, it was." So,
yep.
And it's created by one of the pair from the Flight of the Conchords. So
Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi wrote the film, and Jermaine was the showrunner he was involved with the sort of first season, but actually one of the showrunners now is Paul Simms, who's the reason the show works so well, Paul Simms is a sitcom he is responsible for a lot of the best sitcoms of the last 2 decades. He understands the form better than maybe anyone else. And Stephanie Robinson, who is a newer writer, but who is just incredibly good at her job. She wrote the Jackie Daytona episode for season 2.
So good.
So great show.
Yeah. So if we have not convinced you, I don't know what will, but please check out What We Do in the Shadows. I'm going to kind of pass it to Jonny for your third pick.
All right, awesome. So my third pick is Kevin Can Fuck Himself. On most promotional things, they just say Kevin Can F Himself, but
this is a blue podcast. You're fine.
We'd have to bleep out the first part anyway. So, but yeah, so Kevin Can Fuck Himself is I don't know if anyone else has seen it. It is a dark comedy that stars Annie Murphy, who is best known as playing Alexis Rose in Schitt's Creek. This character is not a bit Alexis at all, and the whole world is very different. It actually exists in 2 kind of simultaneous parallel universes. It's first a multi-camera sitcom comedy, just the typical laugh Trackistan world that has existed since I Love Lucy and the Cramdens and Honeymooners. It's just the boorish husband who has a wife who is, too good. She's too good for him, and just a bunch. It's just the man child that Kevin, he's the titular character, but he really is not the main character. It is Annie Murphy's character, Allison. When she is interacting with him, it's the long-suffering wife. She very much has the same feel of, Alice Cramden, Deborah Barone, Lois Griffin. He's like somebody who has absolutely no reason being with this person, but they end up being there. So he has 2 sidekicks, Kevin's father and then his next door neighbor. And there's also his next door neighbor, Patty, who is her brother, is one of the 3 stooges that they work with, that they're just watching sports, living in Worcester, Mass, watching a lot of Pats, a lot of Sox. So anyone who grew up in the New England area knows these people very, very well. But when she is away from him, it is a single camera, dark, very edgy drama, which really dives into the the terror and the frustration and the misery of her living in this experience, and she's just trying to make her life better. She wants to have a nice house. The first episode, she has a coffee table which she bought at Goodwill, but it's from Pottery Barn, and he smashes it, and everyone makes fun of her that she's so hoity-toity, and she's really not. She works at a liquor store, and she wants to do better than she can, but she's being weighed down by this 250-pound man beast who cares more about Bill Belichick's sweatshirt than he does about his wife. So it gets really dirty. It gets really dark when she is looking to find a way of killing him. The only other person who can transcends the multi-camera verse to the single camera verse is Patty, who is a unlikely ally within Allison's world. She's gritty, she's dark, she smokes on the porch, and really she has no time for Allison at first. She just thinks she's just a flitty idiot who has absolutely nothing to say. But really what it is that she wants to just break out of this world that she's locked herself into. One of the funniest things is they end up driving up to New Hampshire at one point during the scene, and Allison is trying to navigate with some backcountry drug dealers, and she has absolutely no way of knowing how to communicate with any sort of drug dealers. This is not something that Alexis Rhodes would have any problem with, but it's very she's so desperate and she's so nervous, and you can see it on her face that she has no idea what she's doing, but the only thing she wants to do is change her situation in life so badly that she's willing to take these drastic means to do it. It takes a little while to get used to the very quick change from the multi-camera to the single camera, but after episode 2 you really get very comfortable with it, and I'm excited to see what happens on season 2, because you see one of the Three Stooges who actually gets pulled into the single camera verse, which will really tie into something that will happen for season 2, which I can't wait to come out.
And this is on AMC, correct?
This is on AMC, correct.
Has anybody else watched it? I have not watched this one.
I have.
Did you enjoy it? Yeah,
it's a show that I find I found myself admiring it a lot. I think it is a fascinating experiment. Like, I'm very into the premise of it and the kind of switching between the language of the multicam and the multicam sitcom and the sitcom and the single cam prestige drama. And I think a lot of the performances are really fascinating. I think it also, it has this kind of interesting history. It came out of sitcoms that were the Kevin, what are those shows called?
I can't even.
Kevin Can Wait.
Yeah, and Kevin Can Wait.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there was this, an actress who was written off of Kevin Can Wait because she wasn't hot enough for his wife, basically. And that is kind of where the idea of Kevin Can Fuck Himself came from. My colleague Jen Chaney wrote a piece about it. It's really worth reading if you're interested in the show. I think I ended up struggling with the way that it silos those two moods and builds the collapse of them like a mystery structure. Like, you're waiting for the moment where one half kind of subsumes the other. And I think it makes it hard to live in either one fully, but it is certainly a fascinating idea for like messing with TV form.
Does it have a second season? Is that what you said?
There's a planned second season, and it's going to wrap it up. And I don't think that you really couldn't extend this out any longer. It just because it would get very tropey very quickly if you tried to do it any longer. So I think the fact that they're only committed to doing one additional season, I think is smart. Rashida Jones is one of the executive producers of it, so which I find to be interesting. So, but if you love Schitt's Creek, this is not Schitt's Creek at all.
Well, good to know. Thank you, Jonny. That's super interesting. Kate, I'm going to pass it to you for pick number 3.
Pick number 3. Mine weren't in any particular order because I would not say this was my favorite show of the year. It would probably be Get Back. You, season 3.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I really love this show. I've loved this show from the jump. So a lot of people know what You is, but I'll talk about it. You is it is a you know what? Never mind. I'm going to back into my argument here. The same pleasures I get watching You are sort of like the pleasures I get from watching The Americans. Now, bear with me here. Both of these shows use a very particular kind of genre storytelling. For The Americans, it's a spy show. For You, it's like an erotic thriller. To be both that genre story, but also to mine the sort of like rich metaphorical soil about relationships, patterns, social institutions. For The Americans, it's all, it's a spy show, but it's also about the nuclear hetero-American family, what marriage is, what it is to be a parent, what it is to be a child, what it is to be an American. In You, it's about romantic love. So basically, You is everything I loved best about Gone Girl, only 11 billion times funnier. It is so sharp. It has teeth and it's so funny. There have been 3 seasons. The first season, Penn Badgley, or oh my God, what's Jenna call him? Bag Pedgley? What did she calls him like Bag? Anyway, Penn Badgley, who I think has a great sense of humor. So I don't think he would care that I called him Bag. He's a stalker. He's an obsessive, and he basically chooses someone to obsess about and thinks that they're in love. And then eventually things go he starts murdering people, basically. So to both keep this love, but also eventually to protect himself. So the first season is he works in a bookstore and he falls in love with a woman named Beck. And all of the sort of like satirical set dressing setting around it is like lit scene bookstore stuff, right? That's just ripe for satire. Second season, he moves out to California, falls in love with a woman named Love, played by Victoria Pedretti, who is a genius. She's fucking good. And that sort of the milieu that it's satirizing there is the kind of like wellness culture of Southern California. Season 3 is set in San Francisco after, spoiler, he and Love have married and have had a child. And also, she's also a serial killer, so it's very Gone Girl, right? The sort of like two terrible people who are perfect for each other in some ways. And season 3 is very much satirizing the like hyper wellness culture of the Bay Area, the tech bros, the like I can solve everything in my life with like surveillance and cameras. It's so funny and so dark and so insightful and poignant, I think, about the ways that like people get trapped by ideas about the kinds of lives they should be living. It has an exceptional like pair of foils for the 2 main characters, Penn Badgley and Victoria Pedretti, their characters, Pedretti, and Sherry and Carrie, who I just want to mention their names, and I almost don't want to tell anyone else about them. Just like go watch it and just like watch them blossom as the wonderful human beings they are. I love it. So good. It's so good.
It really is.
Oh my God. And the very last episode, like it really, for being a show, it's beautifully plotted. Like every season has a very discrete arc, even though we're following one character from year to year, from season to season, and it keeps kind of getting deeper and deeper in various things. How has nobody found out who Joe Goldberg is yet? Who the hell knows? It doesn't matter. But like the final episode of this season, I thought was so satisfying, so sad, and such an exceptional deployment of a Taylor Swift song that like literally every time I hear that Taylor Swift song, I see what we're seeing, and I hear like there's a line about toes at the very, it's like your duct tape thing, Kathryn. Like I don't want to say what the line is about toes, but it's so good.
It's so good.
So anyway,
it's satisfying.
You is a great show. It's a great show. And
It's a really great fucking show.
Which is so crazy because when I first saw like the ads for it, I was like, is this kind of like a post-teen drama thing? Am I wrong? Did I get the wrong impression?
It's darker than that. It's more adult than that. I mean, I think part of what they're using Penn Badgley, right, to be like, you think he's dreamy, you think he's the boy next door. All the things he's doing are completely fucking psychotic, right? And the show knows that. And I think the show in the past is sort of like the kind of like viewer, what's the word for like people are they're like, oh my God, he's so hot. I'm like, yeah, Penn Badgley is hot, but like Joe Goldberg is fucking terrifying. Like, but also super compelling, but also when you put him in these situations where like the rest of the world is so wild, you know, and the way that it sort of satirizes these various milieus, you're like, actually, the psychopath seems like I'm on his side. He has points.
He has points. You definitely walk away, and especially by the end of season 3, you go, I see what you're talking about. I'm like, I'm with you.
I mean, the other thing about it is that they use a lot of voiceover in the show. Voiceover is often used poorly, but this is one of the few cases where a show has figured out how to use voiceover to create an unreliable narrator, which TV does not know how to do. Yeah. And it is so effective and interesting and messy. And like, it is, I think, another one of those where you're like, yeah, this seems like a really like fun, like kind of silly, strange, dark serial killer kind of show, and it disguises how hard it is to sort of nail the tone of what they're doing.
Yes, the tone is really exceptional, and also like the unreliable narrativeness. I feel like this season, when he has someone like the love character to sort of like, we get her voiceover too, don't we? If I'm remembering correctly.
We do.
Like it's just the sort of like perfect design of what the show has been wanting to become in some ways, and it really just like knocked it out of the park this year.
Yeah.
I would say the voiceovers are almost their own characters. Like it's Joe Goldberg and it's love, but it's in a way it's not. Like they're almost a little bit separated from the person who is living in this terribly sterile Northern California town. So when you're mentioning it earlier, it was that the voiceover isn't there to like tell the story. It's really having a kind of darkly poignant conversation with this fake version of whoever Joe is lusting after, which is kind of creates another level to that particular character.
Yeah, it's character building, and the lies they're telling to themselves that we, the reader, the watcher, are like, yeah, it's a great show. It's a great show. Yeah, no, so you check it out.
Thank you. And like, you've done a great job of explaining, because the marketing did not kind of give me an insight into how psychologically compelling it is. So thank you guys.
And funny.
Like, yeah, I don't think anybody had described it to me as funny before, and like hearing that it has those elements of satire. This is the first I'm hearing about that, and I've talked to people about you several times. So like, this gives me cause to want to get into it more, because I didn't know that was part of it.
Yeah, there's an heiress in the first season who's somehow involved with the literary scene whose name is Peach Salinger. So like, it's like that level, like to the names, but also it's a very clever show that, like What We Do in the Shadows, it like, and what you were just saying, Kathryn, it is doing a lot on a really high level, and it looks like nothing.
This was the reason why this was my first Culture Club post.
That's right. It was. With that being said, Kathryn, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us home with your final pick.
Woo! Bring us home.
Okay. My final choice, I do want to say, like, if anyone reads my stuff, you're going to go on Vulture and be like, these weren't the top actually 3 shows that you picked on your list. Like, yeah, bitches, that's how it goes. My favorite show of the year is Station 11. That doesn't come out actually until next week. So everyone watch that, but I'm not going to talk about it. The show that I really do want to talk about is Reservation Dogs. It is a show that we make our lists at the beginning of the year, like, what are the most anticipated things? Like, should we pay attention to? What's going to be like the really big TV? And those lists are sort of never right. And you always make them and know that there are going to be surprises. But Reservation Dogs was like nowhere. Like no one had heard of it. No one knew that it was a thing. No one knew it was coming. Once they started talking, like it was like on a list, you're like, I don't know what that is. Like I don't have time. I ended up watching it. I think they sent the first 3 episodes at the beginning. And I watched the first episode and was really, really, really taken with it. And it took maybe 2 or 3 more episodes before I was like fully like all in on how incredibly beautiful this show is. It's a Hulu show. It's an FX Hulu show. Who even knows what that means anymore?
Yeah.
I probably should and don't. And it is about 4 teenagers who are of indigenous descent who live on or near a reservation in Oklahoma. And Reservation Dogs is a clear reference to the Tarantino film Reservoir Dogs, and like they sort of dress them like the show plays with that, but it is also a word, like a term used for people who live on a reservation. In the first scene of the first episode, it is these 4 teenagers. Their names are Elora, Bear, Cheese, and Willie Jack, and 2 girls and 2 boys. And they steal a Flamin' Hot Chips truck. They make up a fictional Flamin' Hot Chips called Flamin' Flamers. They steal the truck and then are stuck for the rest of the season with this truck. With like they manage to flip the truck, but then they have like many boxes of Flamin' Flamers, and it's so funny, and I immediately was like. And they're sort of playing with it as a heist kind of a show. You're expecting it to be the same kind of like they're getting into shenanigans on the res, like that's kind of, and it is that show, but the pace very quickly changes and becomes about the fact that they are stuck on this reservation, and have very complicated feelings about it as where their families are, where their heritage is. Also how absolutely stultifying it is as far as like wanting to leave and become another kind of person and like engage with the world more broadly. And so the way that the show moves slowly is a purposeful part of like the kinds of story that it is trying to tell about these characters. It does so many things that are like my very favorite television things. It is just a tiny bit magical realist. One of the characters sees a warrior, sort of like a 19th century Native American warrior who shows up and like tells him that he should be a better man, but also he like pees on stuff sometimes and like occasionally gives messages to the wrong person and is kind of a mess. So he has this like spirit guide who's a comic disaster. It does individual episodes about each of the characters, which I really like as a device, but which few shows do as well as this one does. The performances by the teenagers are some of the best, most naturalistic, most effective, but also controlled performances that I saw on television this year. And I think it tells a story about like America and Americanness that feels it both instantly recognizable and universal in a lot of ways, but also like a kind of story you so rarely see anywhere, and particularly on television. I am just absolutely enamored with how beautiful it is, and I am hoping that lots and lots of people watch it and talk about it because I think it's just astonishing TV.
And this is another Taika Waititi, correct?
Yeah, so Taika Waititi is using his executive producer power now to make shows like this happen, but the showrunner is a guy named Sterling Harjo, and man, what a great job he does.
Great.
That's awesome.
Has anybody else watched this?
I have.
And
beautiful is absolutely the word to ascribe to it. Like, it's beautifully shot. It is beautifully written. It is beautifully acted. Just at every turn, it is both really, really funny, and funny in a very specific way, because it doesn't try to go broadly to like, here is how you understand these elements of indigenous culture. Like, it is, here is how we speak. We will not translate it for you, and you kind of just get what you get, and you are brought into the world that way. But it is also like really deeply emotional. Like, there are elements of that kind of like despondence and hopefulness of wanting to be somewhere that you can't be yet. There's grief. It's so beautifully done. And like, the further you get into it, the more intricate and interesting it gets. And man, exceptional. It was one of those things where it's like, if it was on somebody's list, then I wasn't going to talk about it. But man, Kathryn, full agreement with everything you said.
Awesome. So thank you for sharing that with us, Kathryn. And I think that's actually it for our picks, folks. Did you watch any of them? Do you have opinions? Is there something else that we missed? This episode is just the beginning of the discussion, so let us know your favorites on social media and at greatpopculturedebate.com. I want to say a big thank you to my panelists. You guys picked a great group of shows in a very crowded field of excellent television this year. And a huge, huge thank you to Kathryn for joining us. Kathryn, can you tell people one more time where they can find more of your work?
Yes, I am, as I mentioned, depressingly online on Twitter at Kate VanArendonk. I am a TV critic. I'm actually also a comedy critic, and I'm a features writer for vulture.com/New York Magazine. You can find me there. I am sometimes on WNYC, where I talk about like previews for monthly stuff. And I have a podcast called Appointment Television that is, I make with my two friends. We are in the process of transitioning it into something else. We're not totally sure yet, but it will still definitely exist in at least some forms, including in our good one, bad ones, which we pick good ones and bad ones and then force each other to watch them, especially the bad ones. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for coming and joining us this time. And as for you listeners, you better buckle up, because the Great Pop Culture Debate has plenty more for you in 2022. Come right back to greatpopculturedebate.com right after the new year, as the polls for season 5 will open up for your votes. This time we're taking on Best HBO Original Series, Best Boy Band, Best 1990s Sitcom, and Best 1980s Soundtrack, just to name a few. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to check out our other Best of 2021 episodes devoted to music and film. They will be releasing the last week of 2021, so make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Audible, Smoke Signals, I don't know, whatever. And also make sure to follow us on all of the social media accounts for the latest news. And if you haven't yet supported us on Patreon, what are you waiting for? There are so many great perks, and we'd love to have you as part of our little pod family. Thank you for listening this year, and let's all look forward to a bigger and brighter 2022. And seriously, universe, I mean it this time. Let's get our shit together. Have a good one, everybody.